Shabbat Shalom. We are in Genesis chapter 18. This is our Genesis Shabbat study. And we come to this chapter as we've been looking through Genesis, specifically the last three chapters. We looked at 16, how Sarai and Abram knew that a promise was coming, so they came up with their own idea of how to get it. And that was for Hagar to lay with Abram, and Ishmael was produced. Yah had a different way, and he, chapter 17, gave them the sign of the covenant. And as we come to chapter 18, we now look at the son of promise, which is obviously Isaac. And we watched Sarah and Abram's faith be tested. We watched it be elevated. And just as with us, there are levels of faith that we come to. There are things that we just clearly don't understand when it comes to trusting Yah, and how each opportunity he gives us is an opportunity to learn and get to the next test of faith, and how we don't move to that next step until we pass that first step. So we clearly see that through scripture, and how awesome it is that we do, because here we have regular men and women that we can identify with, that were made of flesh and bone, flesh and blood, just like us. And they had the same opportunities to listen and hear from Yah and to trust him. And their examples are very clearly human, because the same ideas that they have, we have. The same mistakes that they make, we make, and how it's listed here, it's documented here in scripture, and we can watch them as we learn to follow the same way. So we're gonna, how many verses? We have 33 verses. Let's do 6 verses at a time. Who wants to take the first 6 verses? Anyone can raise their hand. All right, go ahead.
I'll take it. All right, so starting at verse 1, it says, and Yahuwah appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day, and he lift up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself towards the ground, and said, My Adonai, if now I have found favor in your sight, pass not away, I pray you, from your servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort your hearts. After that you shall pass on, for therefore are you come to your servant. And they said, So do as you have said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto El Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth.
All right, brother, what do you see? What do you pull up?
Man, first, kind of like, verse 3 or verse 2, it says, that he ran to them, and bowed himself to the ground, and then he says, and said, My Adonai, if I have found favor in your sight, pass not away, I pray you from your servant. So definitely speaking on, Mashiach, definitely bowing down to Mashiach here, and just showing him that reverence, showing him that reverence that Rick spoke on today. Absolutely. And then, he says, when he goes to fetch, I guess, the bread, and he runs to Sarah, I'm reading from the Sefer, and so he says, El Sarah, and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make it cakes upon. So just the way he had acknowledged her as El Sarah, to me, is very powerful, because we know, when you go back into Genesis in the beginning, that he says he made, he created man and male and female, and he made them in his image. So, one thing is that for him to be acknowledging them as her as El, shows that he's taking in consideration the fact that we are created in the image and that we are Elohim. Even Mashiach brings out in Matthew, I believe, when the Pharisees are coming to him asking about how he makes himself equal to Elohim, or he calls himself Elohim, and he says, isn't it written in your Torah that you are Elohim? And I know it's in one of the Psalms where it says that about the people of Yasharal. So I think that in the faith, one of the key aspects that's missing is us coming into full recognition of who we are as being a part of his creation. That if you are made in the image, for instance, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If you are made in the image of Elohim, and you are walking as Elohim, and you are talking as Elohim, then you are Elohim, not being the great Elohim, but you are a representation of him, which means that you are, his child, or you are an Elohim, being made in that image. And I think that is something that really we are cut off from embracing, that we are walking as gods. I would say we should embrace that. And I think when we embrace that, we are gods, and we embrace that, then I believe, and we start to understand who our power comes from, and we really get into knowing what it means to live godly, walk in a godly way. I think that is where we can start to render and harness and allow Yah to manifest his powers through us. But it has to be that full belief. Mashiach speaks on, you of little faith, and it's like, if we have that, or you of little belief, if we have that real belief in us, and that we are made in the image of Elohim, that we can manifest, the things that are of Elohim. So I found it really interesting just how he addressed her, according to the Sefer, and everything. So those are the few things that stood out to me.
Good stuff, brother. I agree. I think we have to be careful, though, simply because of the abuse of an understanding of what those that are of Yisrael being called Elohims, and that for that not to be the forefront of a conversation when speaking with someone who has no idea or doesn't know. So we have to understand that this is for our understanding, and not to put that in the forefront, because it is our duty, because it's more about us representing him, right? And us living like him, so that when people see us, we draw out the question. One of the greatest ways to witness, a lot of people make the mistake in feeling that they have a field of people that they have to go conquer. They got to run out and they got to tell everyone about Mashiach, about Torah, about believing in Yahuah, when in all actuality, the very representation of the way we live ought to draw out the question: what is different about why is he celebrating the feasts and not celebrating Christmas? You understand what I'm saying? It draws all men unto him, right? Because we are living epistles of him. So I think that the focus is more on that rather than walking around. Not that you were saying that we should walk around calling ourselves gods, because there is representation enough out there that is doing that, and it causes a distortion and a misunderstanding of what Scripture's saying. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Anybody else want to add anything to this passage before I add? All right, I'll just go ahead. So, Emeka brought out some great points. So I'll try not to walk over those same ones, but the idea that this is Mashiach was the number one point in the three men. But I also looked at verse 1 where it says the tabernacle trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent of the door in the heat of the day. So Mamre would have been, the same area as Hebron. So it's the same area, but it's in the desert. It's a plain, so it's a flat ground. So he's sitting there at the door of his tent, and then boom, three men appear and they're walking. So can you just imagine that? You're sitting in a plane. Is it a mirage? You know what I mean? What is this I see? But he acts immediately, and he, runs toward them, and he wants to worship. He wants to give reverence to, this is Mashiach, no doubt. So, it really brought to my mind the hospitality that he bestowed, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Bedouin tribes, the Bedouin people in Israel. They live in the Negev. Well, they live in tents, and they have pretty nice tents. They have couches and nice furnishings inside, and they have customs. If you are invited to a Bedouin home, you walk into the home and you would be first given a very bitter tea, right? You would taste that tea, and because of the bitterness, you are to rid your mind of the bitterness of everything that happened or everything that you experienced prior to walking into their tent. So you get rid of it and you leave it at the door. After that, you get a cup of really sweet but robust coffee, and this is basically welcoming you in, and then you have a meal, and they stand there and they watch you eat, and they don't eat until you're full, until you've eaten everything that you could possibly eat. You can eat no more. So at the end of the meal, one of two things happens. Either you're given another cup of coffee with the right hand, which says you are welcomed and you can stay the night, or you're given a cup of coffee with the left hand, which means at the end of this cup of coffee, when it's out of the cup, you can go on your way. Now, if you're given a third cup of coffee with the right hand after the first cup of coffee with the right hand, that means you can stay as long as you want to, for weeks, for months, even years. And it's just a custom that they have, and how this is exhibited through what Abraham does, the hospitality that he bestows on Yahusha and the two, as we find out later in chapter 19, two angels. So I just wanted to bring those two things out. And, you know, the last thing I would say is, I guess we're all men on here now, but, imagine going to your wife and telling her, three people just showed up, go fix this food for them. How would she respond? And Sarah, we'll find out what happened later, but I just wanted to pull those two things out. Anybody want to speak on those? All right, who wants to take the next 6 verses? Anyone? All right, I'll take them. So we stopped in verse 7. So it says, and Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, and he hasted to dress it. And he took butter and milk in the calf, which he dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. And Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I pleasure my master, being old also? What do you guys see there? And I'll go after that.
I definitely see a lack of just belief, in what has been said to her. Because it says in verse 15, it says, then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed. Oh, I'm sorry. It says, I'm sorry, where am I?
You know what?
Let's
read the last few verses, because that ends that whole thought. And if we don't, it's gonna, and then you can come back. So sorry about that. Verse 13, it says, and Yahuwah said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of surety bear a child which am old? Verse 14, is anything too hard for Yahuwah? At time appointed, I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Yasharal shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not, for she was afraid. And he said, nay, but thou didst laugh. Verse 15. So, go ahead, Emeka. I think.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, just her lack of belief. In verse 12 it says, therefore Sarah laughed within herself, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being so old. So it's like, I definitely, it goes back to show you like the level of disbelief that was still even in those who you would have thought would have been walking in full belief. For me, it's like, it just shows you the struggle that we have had, throughout time, putting full faith in the workings of the Father, you know. And then on top of that, she because she laughed within herself, she thought that it was now she knew, like, oh, when he rebuked her and said, you laughed, and she was just like, oh no, I didn't. Now she was scared, like, how did he know that I laughed? It's like, oh no, I didn't laugh, but you did. It's like it shows, and now she's afraid because she's like, oh wow, like this individual knew that I pretty much was, that my faith was weak, almost. Like, this individual knows that I don't believe what I'm being told by, a messenger sent from the Father. Like, I definitely could see, okay, now it's coming to her realizing, like, oh wow, this must be true. Like, there's no way somebody's gonna come and read my mind. And so just off of that, she straightened herself up real quick, but she's, trying to, oh no, I didn't laugh, and so I thought that was, it's just our nature, especially after the fall, like, to not have that belief in that faith, and so I think that's something that just really sticks out to me.
No, that's good. Very good point. Although it's true, I do definitely think there's an unbelief here. That goes without saying. We know that. But think of it from Sarah's point of view, because it mentions a few things here. If you look at verse 11, it says, and this is out of King James, it says, now Abraham and Sarah were old and well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I pleasure my Lord, being also old? You know what I'm saying? So in her mind, she's had menopause. Like, she knew the condition of herself. She knew that physically, scientifically, she was cut off from being able to even do what is said to be done. That's why in the first place she went to Hagar, went and used Hagar as the option. And yes, I think going forward and knowing now, okay, this wasn't the way. Yah didn't tell us to do this, so he has another way. In her mind, she still can't see it because she knows physically she can't. Yah can make all things possible. And then she laughs, this has to be Mashiach. It heard it, right? So I think one of the things that I do now, as I'm reading scripture, because I used to read scripture and I used to say, man, she didn't have any faith, or he didn't do this, or why did he do that? But now I take what they're dealing with and I put myself or experience similar to that, and what would I have done? What would I have done if I was Kepha, and, being approached with possible death and then having to deny Messiah? Would I have done the same thing? You know what I mean? What is the situation? Are there men with guns and knives standing all around saying, is that your Mashiach? You know what I mean? Would I have done it? I would like to think that I would, but what would I do in that moment? So when we do that, when we allow ourselves to look at these examples as personal, in touch occurrences, we allow ourselves to really be filled with the Ruach and allow us to understand what is going on in the mind, so that we don't have to respond the exact same way, but respond the way that they did later. Sarah being part of the promise as well with Abraham. That's who the promise would come through, So a lot of things going on with them, you know, and her laugh was in, yeah, okay, you know, all right, is this real? You know, what is he talking about? You know, so I think at that moment there was a more understanding and a trust that was elevated into believing now that this could be the way that Yah has promised us. So you want to take the next few verses?
Yeah. All right. So verse 16, and the men rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And Yahuwah said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall guard the way of Yahuwah to do justice and judgment, that Yahuwah may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. And Yahuwah said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before Yahuwah. Should I continue or
What verse did you stop?
stop at 22?
Yeah, that's cool. What you see there?
You know, what I see definitely just, you know, the fact that the cries of the, you know, one thing that, you know, the Father always hears the cries of his people. And then he's saying, in verse 20 says, and because of the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because of their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. So it's like when they're acknowledging the cries, I'm thinking they're definitely somewhat similar to what happened in Mitzrayim. What happens in Mitzrayim later on is that there's definitely people of Yah being oppressed in Sodom. You know, it can't just be. I mean, we all know Sodom and Gomorrah is full of wickedness, and we all think of the abominations that they're doing, but it must be not just them, you know, in their sexual immorality, but also that they are doing unjust things and tormenting, you know, people that are the children of Yah, you know, that are living within the city as well. That's something that for the first time stuck out to me. You know, them talking about the cries, because we know the Father hears the cries of his children. You know, he hears the cries of those that are seeking him. So that definitely stuck out to me.
No, that's good, brother. I saw some other things there. You know, because it says that it says a couple things. It says the men looked toward Sodom. So that would have been Yahusha and the two messengers, the two angels, right? Then it says, and Abram went with them. So they're going toward Sodom. Now they know why they're going, but Abram doesn't know why they're going. right? Look at the compassion of Yahuwah. Look at the compassion of Yahusha. What does he say? He says, shall I hide? You know, and then he says, for I have known him. This speaks of that he has compassion for him. You know, he has a relationship with him. He has a purpose for him, so as not to discourage him. He says, should we tell him? Should we tell him what I'm about to do? You know what I mean? Like, what would Abraham's testimony be to all of the generations that came after him, that he was being Baruch with, what that he was being promised with, that the covenant was about? What would his testimony of Yahuwah be if he walked into a surprise and watched him just kill the whole town, including Lot? But he doesn't do that. He says, should I tell him? Should I hide from him these things? For I have known him. I know him. I have a relationship with him. I want to make sure that he understands what exactly is going on here. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a level of, respect that, he's definitely showing, Abraham, that he says, because he says, I know that he will command his children and his household after him, that they shall guard the way to do justice and judgment, that Yahuwah may bring upon Abraham that which has spoken of him. So he's definitely looking at his character and saying, I know this is a righteous man, that's, should I hide it from him? Like, this is not something I should hide from him. This is not, you definitely get that feeling. This is not something I want to keep from him, because how his emotions may stir up later about the situation, so he's definitely taking into consideration Abraham and, his righteousness, but also how it could impact him. It's like you said, showing compassion. How could this impact him? How would it impact him and his relationship with the Father? Could it turn him away from the Father? Could it turn him away from his faith? If something like this happened, we were here and I'm not clear or coming forth about it. It could definitely change his attitude towards the Father. So I definitely think that it was a precautionary measure, knowing his righteousness and what he seeks to do the will of the Father.
Absolutely. I mean, because you said, how would it affect him in the future? How would it affect him at that moment? Like I said, it says that, they look towards Sodom and Gomorrah. That means they're walking that way. Abraham goes with them. Lot's there. He just decides to just demolish it, destroy it, for its depravity. And Abram stands there and watches it. What would his response have been at that moment? Right?
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, Rick, we just talked about how Yahusha and the two messengers were about to go to Sodom, and then they discussed, should I hide from him what we're about to do? And we talked about how that was Yahuwah's compassion towards his friend, right? He had a relationship with, not to withhold that information, to let him know what he was about to do. And Emeka brought out that, Yahusha would have known his character, Abraham's character, and how in the next verses we're going to see exactly what his character caused him to do, in the response to him letting him know, we're about to go destroy it. Give him an opportunity to show his character about what I just told him and how much his character comes through. You want to add anything to that?
Aleph Tavs that are located in this. Am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay, because it showed a thing on there saying I was muted. All right. Basically, there's a few of them that are listed in verse 19. He says, "For I know him, that he will command the left of his children, and the left of his household after him, and they will guard the way of Yahuah, to do justice and judgment, that Yahuah may bring upon Abraham a left of that which he has spoken to him." You know, it's interesting when you look at all, as you guys have pointed out, you know, he has compassion, even when he's about ready to bring some destruction, you know, but he wants to remind him that, you know, I have a covenant with you, your children, your household, you know, I've made this covenant with you, and I will do as I have said. But you got to trust me. What you're about to see, you know, I think is why he's bringing this caution to him. Like, I ain't gonna hide nothing from you. You know, you're gonna see that I do what I say. You know, just like I'm gonna do with you as well. But at this point, he's ready to go do something. Like you said, they're about ready to head in and to do some destruction. And to bring judgment basically upon these people, which include, like you said, Lot. So, you know, Yahuwah has compassion with his people. He knows that this stuff's going to be troubling for us, you know. So, you know, that's basically all I seen in that point when I was following along while you guys were talking. But I'm looking forward to see what's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. You want to read? We've stopped in verse 23. You can actually go from verse 23 to the end if you want.
All right, I will do that. Actually, let me, I guess I could do it in here. "And then men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before Yahuwah. And Abraham drew near and said, Will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked?" So he was concerned about the righteous as well. "And perchance there be 50 righteous within the city, will you also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from you to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" And Yahuwah said, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes." And Abraham answered and said, "Behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto Adonai, which am but dust and ashes. Perchance there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Will you also destroy Aleph Tav, all the city, for lack of 5? And he said, If I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke unto him yet again, and said, Perchance there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for the 40's sake. And he said unto him, Oh, let not Adonai be angry, and I will speak. Perchance there shall be 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it if there find 30 there. And he said, Behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto Adonai. Perchance there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, Oh, let not Adonai be angry, for I will speak yet but this once. Perchance 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And Yahuwah went his way. As soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. Looked like he was trying to negotiate if he could just find even down to 10. You know, he was negotiating from 50 all the way down. He's like, you know, who am I to ask this of you? But what if there's this much? What about this much? How about that much? you know. And every time he said, for their sake, I won't destroy it. But he knew what he was going to find. But for Abraham's sake, he told him, I won't destroy it if I find that many there. You know, that's pretty interesting, that the boldness, I think, of Abraham to be able to come and present this in that way, you know, kind of negotiating on the behalf of the righteous that should possibly be found there. But as we know, he didn't find any, which is kind of weird in itself, isn't it? That on all this area, there's not even one? Other than Lot and his family, right?
Right. You know, what's interesting here too is, you know, we talked about earlier. We talked about when we were speaking on how Abraham's hospitality towards the three. We spoke of the Bedouin tribes that are still there in Israel, right? And they live in the Negev, and their custom. Well, also part of the custom when you go into the marketplace is that if you see a piece of merchandise that you want, a high price is always offered first.
Interesting.
In expectation that you will come lower and there will be a negotiation, you know, a bargaining, if you will, between what the price will be. And this is expected. A matter of fact, it's thought of as insulting if you don't. You know, I know of people that have told me about their experiences. Yeah. You know, and this happens a lot in foreign countries, but specifically we're speaking of the Israel desert area. And it's almost like Yahusha, when he says to the two messengers, should I not tell him that part of it was what Emeka said, knowing what Abraham's character was and expecting him to make a plea for those that were there.
That shows his heart, doesn't it?
Because like you said, it was a stair step. He went down, you know, and, you know, that made me think about us. Like, you know, a lot of us, you know, not us here, not me, you, Emeka, JP, and the rest of our fellowship, but people, so-called believers in general, they look for the destruction of the wicked. They almost want it, you know. Kef just did a message on Job and how he was angry when Yah was going to save Nineveh. he wanted their destruction. And, you know, there are people out here that need to hear the word. Do we want to see them saved, or would we rather them see in their folly them be destructed? You know, and here is a clear case of how our posture should be. Abraham was like, well wait, you know, don't pass your judgment, not only because Lot's there, because he just didn't save one in his family. He said he started with a high number and went down as low as to stretch the mercy of the Father, that none of these things would happen to the wicked, you know, and the righteous that were there, you know. The righteous rather, not the wicked, but to seek to find if there was some righteous there before there was just destroyed holistically, and just the bargaining that he did, the skills that he portrayed, the character that comes out, and the questions that he's asking here. He's asking the Creator these things on behalf of the people, you know. Noah preaching on behalf of the people that might come and join them on the ark, you know. And we see that throughout Scripture with all of the prophets. What were they? So
that should be our character too, then.
Absolutely.
We should be more concerned about the salvation of the righteous over the destruction of the wicked, or the judgment.
Absolutely.
That's interesting stuff. But, you know, I thought also Sodom and Gomorrah was a pretty good size area of people, right? There was a number of people there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard estimates in the hundreds of thousands even that were there. Isn't it interesting that he only started with 50? Or instead of like 100 or 1,000 or something? You know, he starts with 50 and he goes down to 10. So his expectation maybe even wasn't that high who was going to be found there, but whoever it might have been, it would have been found righteous. Would you destroy it for their sake? And it's interesting also that Yahuwah said that he would spare it if he could find that many, even down as few as 10.
Right. And Abraham testing y'all, just saying, oh, he said 50. Well, what about 45? What about 30? So he was pleading, but it's beautiful to see the heart of this man. You know what I mean? And all that he had been through. Where his mind still was. You know what I mean? He didn't get haughty. He didn't get braggadocious. He didn't get, to a point of holier than thou, caring only about himself. Oh, man, yeah, let's go on down here and destroy him. You know what I mean? No, it wasn't that. It was, yeah, would you please, down on bent knee, face down, if you will. Please don't destroy them if I can find 10, that they might be saved too. So,
but then you got the opposite side of that. That shows the mercy of Yahuwah too.
Mm-hmm.
That he's actually willing to spare all of this destruction of these evil, wicked people if they can even find 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty amazing on that side of it too. It shows his character and his compassion for those that, that are actually walking in righteousness too. That he would actually spare all the wicked on the behalf of a few.
Absolutely. Mecca, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm just looking for it right now, because there is a verse in Ezekiel. Right here, I found it. In Ezekiel chapter 18, it says in verse 23, it says, "Have I any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, says Adonai Yahuwah, and not that he should return from his ways and live." So when you brought that out about Abraham, I thought about what Mashiach said. If you were children of Abraham, you would do the works of Abraham, and clearly that definitely would involve having compassion, and wanting the wicked to turn from their ways, that they would be saved, and so it's just, when it goes back to when you were speaking on Jonah and Nineveh, it's like, man, he really didn't have that. He wanted them to just be finished and done with so bad. He was just like, yo, like, I don't even want to be here no more. Just take my life. You're going to save their life. Just take my life, but it was, and he had to remind them, I'm going to have compassion over the covering that, because I gave them you for a covering so that they could turn from their ways. And just like I gave you the covering and he gave them the covering in the desert with the little bush, I'm going to have compassion, over you, which I gave for a covering to them, and it's just like, these days, like you said, there's so many people praying for the destruction of these wicked nations, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing. Our job is to be praying for the nations that they will turn from their wickedness. And so, I'm sure that's even what Abraham, I'm sure as soon as those three left, Abraham got to pray. I'm sure Abraham got to pray and was like, please, find, have mercy on this. Like, let there be, whatever number will be inadequate enough for you to have mercy, but at the end of the day, Mashiach knew, he knew when he was walking and he's like, we're not going to find 10. We might find 7, but we're not going to find 10, so just if you, kind of, just going back to it though, but if you are the children of Abraham, you should be doing his works, and that is praying for those, the wicked to turn from their ways, overall.
Very good, brother. Very good. That's exactly the point I was trying to make, in that, we are to emulate. We are to be living epistles. Isn't it amazing how Rick's message led into this? Like, we were supposed to do chapter 17 or chapter 18 like 2 weeks ago. For some reason, it was held off. That everybody's schedule didn't allow for it to happen until now, and it totally ties into what Rick spoke about this morning, and how we are living epistles of the word, and how we are, like Yahusha said, if you were children of Abraham, you would do like Abraham. And this is a clear picture. Go ahead, JP.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the aspect of righteous. I thought that was very interesting. I know there's references to Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom at least throughout Scripture. But I don't know. I was just thinking about righteous, and like how we're to be righteous. He says, "Blessed are the righteous," and it's like, it really just put my mind to thinking about that word and then the people that were in Sodom and Gomorrah, how he didn't find no righteous, people there. And I was like, man, like, it just kind of elevated for my own understanding for us as believers of today, especially, we're walking this word out, and, just thinking about the Beatitudes where it says, blessed are the, the righteous, and blessed are the, you're like, man, like, you got a high calling, and it gets lowered down sometimes, even by myself. Like, sometimes I just try to make it more comfortable, like, oh, you don't got to, but, at the end of the day, it's a high calling, to walk this word out, and to be righteous is not just simply, I guess, simple things. There's a lot to it. So that's all I was just thinking about. Just want to bring up that point of the righteousness, and how many people was he going to find in that city that were righteous? And it's like, man, like, and if Rick was saying, there's estimated numbers of 100,000 people. I look at my city I live in, there's 500,000 people on the population number. You're like, wow, like, we got a high calling to do, so just want to bring up that point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, man. And I think it's important to note too, like, even in what you said, speaking of, the high calling, we also got to keep in mind that, Yahuwah says, all throughout the Torah, it is not burdensome. It is not too hard for you. These things, if we follow them, you know what I mean? So as much as we look at them, if we're looking incorrectly as tasks and things we have to do, I don't look at it like that. I look at it and say, man, I get to do these things. It's grace that he gave us the Torah, that he made a way for us, so we have to look at it in that way, and, pray that, our example leads others to want to follow that way as well. Because it on the surface, it looks like it's burdensome when it's not. It's not hard for us to do. It's hard for us to switch our minds from ourselves to his mind, but it's not hard for us to do. He's made it easy for us, actually.
And interesting how that also ties in during to what the scripture talks about, how the wide and the narrow path, and how many will find it, and will go down the wide path that leads to destruction, but there's only a few that are actually going to find the path and walk it and live it, these righteous ones. How this disparity is, this is one of the main things that I see coming out of Christendom and the religious world, that I once thought I was on the right side of all of this. And then you look at it, this is the largest religion in the world and has the most following it. And that right there is a disparity that goes against what the scripture says. And now we're seeing the example here, just in this one city, how they can even find 10 out of all of these hundreds of thousands of people, however many there was, you know.
Man, you just brought something out that I always used to think about. Like I used to always, you know, see the passage, narrow, broad, and I'd be like, but there's so many. Like there's so many so-called believers. How is this narrow? Like, but now I see, you know, now I see the narrow way. I see the narrow road, you know, and how it makes sense now.
Yeah.
You know, make teshuvah, return to Torah. You know what I mean? Those that do that. Like, and nobody wants to do that. They look at you sideways and like, really? The feasts? You do what? Y'all live in a tent for 10 days. Why? You know what I mean? Do you not read scripture? You know, nah, I didn't used to read that part either because I thought it was done away with, or it was just good history to have. And just to see the way it used to be. But now there's something great. You know, come on, man. So us coming to that understanding now, you know, and understanding what a true believer is to do, what a true believer is actually to believe, those things get silenced, you know, they get extinguished. And like we always say, the thought gets perished from the mind, right? So.
Well, that just goes right back to what we were saying like today about this study on worship. You know, we all in our minds are thinking we need to dig into this and really pull this apart to really gain that proper understanding of what is it required, where the rest of the world and Christendom, if you will, they're not concerned about that. They just do whatever the rest of everybody else is doing. We're trying to be the set apart ones. We're trying to come into a complete understanding of how we ought to walk that narrow path. You know, what is that? You know, and I'm finding, as well as I'm sure you are, there's a difference between how we're walking and how we used to walk. You know, the things that we believe now are not what we used to think or how we used to believe. So that just really, to me, it just confirms so much more that I'm on the right path because it's important to me. Just like I'm sure it was for Abraham when he was concerned for the righteous that were going to be destroyed, or, you know, along with the wicked there. You know, I'm just glad that I'm part of this crew that's willing to go ahead and be set apart, to dig into stuff, to be able to find out how do we walk that narrow path. Because I surely wasn't taught this, how to walk it, you know. And there ain't very, as we can see in this Genesis here, there wasn't very many there too, you know.
Absolutely not. So, anyone else want to add anything? Chapter 18. All right, this concludes our Genesis chapter 18 study, where we looked at Isaac being the son of promise, and then we looked at the prerequisite for chapter 19, where Sodom will be destroyed. So we'll tackle that next week. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Praise Yahuah.
Hallelujah.
Praise Yahuah.